Here's another problem from your lab, section 3.1. We want to find the equation of the line tangent to the curve at the given point, and then we want to illustrate by graphing the curve and the tangent line on the same screen. So we have y is equal to 8x minus 7 times, 8x minus 7 times square root of x. And we want the tangent line at the point 1, 1. So first, we want to acknowledge the idea that we are looking for this expression, the equation, and we have the x sub 0 here, 1, and y sub 0 here. So those are the numbers that would go into the formula. And so the only thing that we're looking for is the slope m, and the slope is going to be the derivative. And then the derivative has to be evaluated at the point x is equal to 1. So first we're going to look for the derivative of f of x. So this is f of x over here. F prime of x. So the derivative, this is a sum or a difference of two expressions. So we have, we can take the derivative of each one individually. The derivative of 8x is equal to 8. Now this expression is 7 times x to the 1/2 power. So 7 times x to the 1/2 power. When you take the derivative of that, you bring the, well, let's do it here on the side and make sure we do it correctly. We have 7 times x to the, let's try that again, 7 times x to the 1/2 power. And the derivative of this is bringing the 1/2 down, so that's going to give us 7 over 2, and then taking this 1/2 and subtracting 1 from it. So 1/2 minus 1, this power is just going to give us a negative 1/2. So that's going to be the power that we have. Now x to the negative 1/2 is actually, well, we can write it here because it looks like they have an x here, so the power is going to be negative 1/2. And then we have a 2 in the bottom. Oops. We have a 2 here in the bottom, so we'll put the 2 down here. Okay. So that's the derivative. And what we want to do after we find this derivative is to find the slope, we have to put the value of 1 in here. So the value of 1, we're looking at the x value 1. And we put that in here. Well, that's like putting a 1 in for x. So we get 7/2 and then a 1 in here. And then we have 8. Well, they want us to figure out what 1 to the negative 1/2 power is. I think that's still going to be equal to 1. So that's, imagine that as 1 divided by the square root of 1. And so if that's the case, then this whole thing here would be equal to 1, and we have 8 minus 7/2. So 8 minus, let's try to work this out just to be careful. 8 minus 7/2. So this is going to be 16 minus 7. So this is equal to 16 minus 7. And let's divide that whole thing. I think I need to rewrite this a little bit. So 16 minus 7 divided by 2, and that's 9/2. So I think your slope here is going to be 9/2. So now that we have our slope, we have a point y minus y1. y1 is equal to 1 is equal to the slope, 9/2, and then x minus x1, or x naught. So that's going to be 1 in here. and that should be the equation of your line. You can go a step farther and you know, write it in y equals mx plus b form. So to do that, you distribute this 9/2 to the x, so that would be 9/2 x, and then you distribute the 9/2 to the 1, so that's -1, but then you have an extra 1 out here, so maybe we should do that whole thing here. We have y minus 1 is equal to 9/2 x minus 1, and so the distribution part, when you distribute, this becomes 9/2 x minus 9/2, and then we have to add 1 to both sides. Let's copy this whole thing again. Add 1 to both sides, that would make this disappear, and then we add 1 here. So we need to know what -9/2 minus 1 is. So 1 is actually 2/2, and so this is -9 plus 2, so I think that's a -7, and then the denominator stays the same. So now we have our equation of the line written in the point slope form, or so the slope intercept form. And then now let's take a look at the graph of this. One of the keys is that this has to be tangent to at this point. So we can automatically eliminate a handful of them just by looking at where it's tangent. And so this one, we have the line tangent at this point. This point is -2, so that's not correct. This is tangent over here at -1. That's not correct. This is tangent over here at less than 1. So it has to be this this value. But you know, it's always worth the time to go to Desmos or something to go ahead and graph this line or this graph. So let's go to Desmos real quick and then type in our graph. That was an 8x. Let's remind ourselves what that graph was. This is 8x minus 7 square root of x. So y is equal to 8x minus 7 times the square root of x. So that's how the graph looks like. Maybe we can zoom in a little bit. This is the point 1, right here. And so hopefully our tangent line would be passing through that point. So let's put the tangent line in. The tangent line is y equals to 9/2 x minus 7/2. And here we go, tangent at that point. And the closest to that would be this graph over here. All right, so we'll submit, and then now we're done. Hopefully that helps.